Hello and welcome everyone to today's workshop on graduate applications in creative arts. Before I begin, I just want to let you all know that this workshop is being recorded. And so if you are comfortable being in the recording, you can keep your videos on, but if not, then please keep them off. Please also keep yourselves on mute during the presentation. And then when we move to the Q&A part, you can unmute and ask your question, or you can put them in chat and we will put them to the speakers. We'll begin by I'll just introduce Project EduAccess and the speakers to you, and then I'll hand it over to our three wonderful speakers who've joined us today. And all three of them come from different backgrounds and have done different degrees. So they'll sort of speak to their what they've done and what the application process looks like in their field. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are Project EduAccess. We're a network of people and sort of an organization that works to making opportunities for higher education, professional opportunities accessible to learners from marginalized communities. We recognize that these opportunities are sort of systematically and structurally denied through cost, information, and dispositional barriers to those coming from marginalized communities in India. And we try to address them through different ways. We run a graduate mentorship program. We engage in advocacy with organizations and institutes in sort of higher education institutes across the world. And we also do a lot of in-person and online capacity building sessions. And so today is one of those sort of online workshops that we were conducting. So as I said, we have three really wonderful panelists who are going to speak to you about graduate applications. We have with us Moonis Ahmad, who did a PhD in fine arts and music. I'm sorry, I think that should have been a PhD in visual arts from University of Melbourne, and he received the Australian Graduate Research and Training Program Scholarship to pursue his PhD. We have with us Srukrupa Raghunathan, who is pursuing her PhD in film studies from Queen Mary University of London. And we have with us Khushboo, who is doing an MFA in fine arts from Goldsmiths University of London and is an INLAC scholar for 2022 and 2022 to 2024. I'll now hand it over to Moonis to take the presentation forward.
Thank you so much, Misbah, and thank you for having me in the panel. It is great to share the panel with Krupa and Khushboo, and thank you all for joining us. We'll be going through what is required for you to apply for PhD, usually practice-led research in visual arts and creative arts. And we'll also talk about masters as well, the other panelists. So Misbah, if you can please go to the next slide. Yeah. So I want to begin, before we get into applications, I want to begin with a question, actually, that what is artistic research? Artistic research is slightly different from other academic research in the sense that it is a very complex and a contested concept in academia at the moment. There are no universal definitions at the moment what it encompasses and what are its boundaries and specific structures, but it is challenging to map and define artistic research because it blurs the traditional boundaries of research. And it has led to debates that kind of think about what constitutes artistic research in creative arts. So it may not adhere or it may not agree to the same criteria as other scientific researches, both in its methodology as well as its outcomes. So artistic research also disrupts conventional epistemological paradigms, and it prioritizes a more, let's say, subjective, experiential, or a context-based forms of knowledge, which might be in stark contrast to traditional emphasis on objective, empirical, and replicable knowledge in academic research. So this departure from the established academic norms also adds complexity to to the question of evaluation or assessment of artistic research. So when artistic research is, for example, produced, how do we evaluate and how do we assess it if it doesn't fit into the academic norms and structures? So artistic research usually and often relies on creative works or artistic works, for example, performances, films, or exhibitions as its primary outcomes. And so deciding, for example, how to document and represent these works as research outputs can also be contentious. The traditional research forms, for example, written dissertation and thesis, they may not capture the essence of these artistic outcomes. And again, they challenge the normative boundaries of disciplinary outputs and research. Khushboo, if you can do next. Thank you. So, due to such stark differences in the very fundamental concepts of research in creative arts, the application requirements for artistic research seem to be also different from the usual academic research applications. But they also vary from institution to institution and subdiscipline to subdiscipline. And so, for example, if you're applying for a PhD in visual arts, the requirements can be totally different for if you're applying a PhD, let's say in film studies or in performance art or in music. So it varies from discipline to discipline and also institution to institution. So broadly, there are two kinds of research programs in creative arts. One is the usual theory-based research, which usually you can do in art history or art philosophy. But another one is practice-led research. And practice-led research is something that we are going to talk about. And it includes largely a theoretical component in the form of a dissertation, in the form of papers that you write over the period of your candidature, and also studio component, whereby the candidates have to produce consistently produce creative work during their candidature, and the creative work that they produce become part of their dissertation at the end. So the outcomes, the creative outcomes can be paintings, drawings, and sculptures, or installations, or performances, or films, and then anything extending beyond these categories into interdisciplinary outcomes as well. Ms. Murphy, you can go next. Okay, so eligibility criteria for a PhD. I'm going to talk specifically about academic institutions from Australia. So I studied at the University of Melbourne. So this is how I applied, and this is what was required in that degree when I applied. And there's also a possibility before I get into it. So there's also a possibility of doing masters by research as well. So there's a masters by coursework, whereby you kind of have subjects that you enroll in, and then there are tutors for all of those subjects. And then the usual classes go on. But in masters by research, what happens is that there are no courses per se. It's a totally self-directed master's program, a research-based self-directed master's program, and you produce a body of work at the end. And then you also kind of write a dissertation, a short thesis, not a dissertation in that sense. But in Australia, I'm not sure about any other country. In Australia, what you can do also while you're enrolled in Masters by Research program is after 1 year, if you feel that your research project cannot be contained in the framework of a master's degree, then you can propose to the panel that you want to convert your master's project into a PhD. So your first year of master's becomes then the first year of PhD. So that's also a possibility in some institutions. So, but generally in PhD programs, a 4-year bachelor degree in a relevant discipline is required, as well as a master's degree, either by coursework or by research. Qualification and professional experience is also desirable. If you have professional experience, that will be great. So in terms of funding, in Australia, research and training program scholarships, in Melbourne specifically, there are Melbourne research scholarships that are available for doctoral research in various academic institutions in Australia. This includes a fee offset, So you don't have to pay fee, a monthly stipend, as well as a health insurance for the duration of your study. And then it varies institution to institution. At the University of Melbourne, the funding also included a relocation allowance, which was like a small fee that they paid when you relocated to Australia. So all applications are automatically considered for the scholarship, and therefore a separate application for scholarship is not required. Yeah, if you can. All right, so the application process, what is required for the application when you're applying, for example, at the University of Melbourne, is a research proposal for 2,000 words, a PDF of your creative work, also called portfolio or folio. It should contain a maximum of, let's say, 10 images or 8 minutes of video if you work in video primarily. But this also again varies from institution to institution. Sometimes it can extend to 20 images, or sometimes there can be no limitation. It depends on the institution you're applying in. So please check the websites. You're also required to put in your CV, letters of recommendation, and preliminary approval and support from supervisors. We are going to talk more about it. And then finally, when you submit all of these documents, you are invited for an interview, which can be taken in person, or you can do it online as well if it's not possible for you to be in Australia. And I feel that one of the most important aspects of your application is your research proposal. So research proposal is extremely important and should be carefully written and framed. Um, so the research proposal addresses, it is aimed to address a significant research gap, and through a set of questions. These questions are called research questions in academic language. So, and in your research proposal, what you're trying to propose is that there's a gap in the state of knowledge in a particular field, and your research kind of addresses that gap, fills that gap through answering these questions. The research proposal also theorizes your own creative research. And what that means is that the artwork that you produce, or artist creative outcomes that you produce during your candidature, it also theorizes that. But in your proposal, it also aims to theorize whatever you have done so far. So if you're submitting, let's say, if you're talking about 5 works in your research proposal, it theorizes them a little bit and kind of proposes that these questions are coming from the artistic work that I have done so far. And building from them, it addresses methodologies and underlying theories that address the research gap through your questions. If you can. Okay. So another important part of your application is supervisor nomination. So what you have to do is PhD applicants usually have 2 supervisors. One is a primary supervisor or a principal supervisor, and the second one is a secondary supervisor. So you have to, before you apply, you have to nominate your own supervisors, and there's a process for that. And at University of at University of Melbourne, there's a dedicated page called Find My Expert, and you can go in there and have a look at the current academic staff who are taking supervisions, and you can choose which supervisor fits you the best, according to the nature of your proposed research and the research undertaken by the supervisors. So once you identify, but it's also very important that you're very particular, and you really research your supervisors as well, see the kind of work they're doing, see the kind of research that they're undertaking, and it should somehow resonate with your own research before you kind of nominate them. So once you've kind of identified what supervisors you want, you have to get in touch with them through their emails, which are also listed on their websites. And in your email, what you have to do is you have to share your proposal, your CV, and a folio. And you have to express interest that you want to pursue a PhD in at the University of Melbourne, for example, and you are interested in being supervised by XYZ. So And then once you receive a response from your supervisors, you take a screenshot of that email and put and use that alongside your application. So, Ms. Pat, next, if you can. Okay, so the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music at University of Melbourne assesses applications in 2 rounds each year, depending on what course you apply. But I think for PhD, it's just 1 round, and it begins at the deadline ends at 31st October. But for Masters by Research, you can apply mid-year or start year as well. So the mid-year applications are assessed in May, and outcomes are generally sent out via email in late May and early June. And for courses that start in, let's say, February or March, they are assessed in October and November, and outcomes are generally sent in November and December. Yeah, if you can go next, thank you. So the selection process is that once you submit your application through their website, through the university website, with all those documents, it is passed on to the selection board or selection panel. They assess your application during October and November, and they send you an email if you're shortlisted, or if you're invited for an interview. And then outcomes are generally sent out via email in November or December. So that's the usual procedure. It's a very simple procedure, but sometimes it takes time because in December things start to slow down because of Christmas, and so you really want to make sure that you are keeping in touch with the university at this time. So your, like I said, your research proposal is is a very important aspect of your application. It should be very clear in terms of the questions it is asking and the material it engages with, both visual material and theoretical material. Usually, there's a lot of support material on how to write research proposals on university websites. So feel free to kind of skim through the university websites and see what you can get or can't get. And CV and folios are also very important. They should be formatted with consistency, and your focus should be on content. No flowers, no balloons and hearts in there. Just keep it as simple as possible and as coherent with consistency as possible. Distracting attention away from the CV towards the design elements is totally not desirable. It backfires. So and then if there are any confusion and questions, you must write to the university. It's their job to answer your queries and questions, and usually they are helpful, usually. But be mindful of the deadline, and pushing your deadline to the last day really does not work. Sometimes things crash down at the university, and their websites crash down depending on the traffic and all of that stuff. So don't take any chance. So be mindful of the deadline and prepare everything in advance. Okay. So yeah, that's it. I'll pass it to Khushboo, who will take you to Masters in Finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Moonis. Hello. So I've done my master's in fine arts and I'm doing it in the UK. So most of my slides or tips are based on that, but it can also generally be applicable to other places and other countries as well. Starting from application process, the first thing is to identify the right course or institute when you are thinking of applying for a master's, MA or MFA. And the thing is that most of the time we try to find the top university or top ranking institute or top ranking course. First of all, know your practice and try to find the synergy with an institute which supports that kind of practice, or any alumni or any tutor who's practicing in the same field, or your artistic ambitions align with what institute teaches or offers would be the best practice to go around. Then talk to the present student or alumni, approach them. Most of the universities in the UK also have listed down the current students you can approach to understand what's the process like, how's the course like. Try to get in touch with them and get to know the course a bit more. And the other things to consider when you are applying for an institute, or even if you're in the process of searching for the right institute, is what are the facilities that the institute offers? Do you want these facilities, or if you have any facilities or infrastructure in mind for your own practice in visual arts or fine arts? What does university or the institute specializes in? And what are the opportunities that the institute has? Are they do they work in collaboration with any galleries or any other institutes that give you an option for exhibitions or wider networking? Post that, the other thing is to write your personal statement or statement of purpose. So there's a slight difference between two. Go through the university or institute's page and what are the criteria they have mentioned, what are the prompts they mention. According to that, write your SOP or personal statement. Important thing to mention in your statements is what are your ambitions and motivations for the masters. What have you already done in the field would already be there on your portfolio, but what do you want to expand on? Why a master's would help you to do that would be a good area to write about. And different institutes have different word count. Even in UK, some institutes, some universities have 500 word count for the SOP and some has 1,000. So accordingly, keep a draft of 2 or 3 different word count personal statement ready before you apply it anywhere. Next slide, please. Then comes the artist statement and portfolio. Portfolio and artist statement are the main criteria for your application. They are to be put together according to the criteria mentioned in institute's page. So depending on how many number of pages or images an institute wants, organize your portfolio. It's important to keep it clean, accessible, and minimum decoration and clear images. Wherever necessary, add detailed images of your works as well, and try to keep it in a chronology. Usually keep 2 works from your previous 2-3 years and not only recent work. You can add more as well, but try to keep your best works, best practice on the portfolio for the panel to go through your works and practice. Some institutes also require artist statement to be in the same PDF of your portfolio, whereas other have a different section for you to upload your artist statement. And just like your personal statement, some require artist statement to be of 100 words, 250 words, or 500 words. Keep artist statements ready with different word counts as well. Some institutes, say like RCA, they also require a video statement of the applicant, where an applicant explains their practice in a video format. And in that one, the production quality of the video is not at all judged. So it's just they want to know how an applicant describes their practice, how confident are they about their practice, and how do they look at their own practice. Then comes the CV. CV for MA and MFA in UK is not a strong criteria. Try to keep it minimal and add maximum 2 pages with your educational qualifications, the exhibitions or displays you have done, if you have written anything, if you have um, if you have work experience related to your um, art field or any other field that is that has helped you um, get into art, try to mention them and keep it very short and simple. Do not add any images, do not add anything about your practice in your CV. It needs to be short and simple. Then comes letter of reference. Most of the universities require you to um, have at least one LOR um, from a professor or a tutor from your previous institute, and the other one can be from any employer, mentor, or guide. Most of the places require only 2 LORs, some require 3 as well. Identify the mentor or professor or a guide who has known your practice throughout, who has seen your um, practice over the period of time. They have seen it grow and expand. And most of them, they already know what the content should be in the LOR. But still, some institute also put it out on their websites, on their application page. What are the requirements for LORs? What do they want? It's a good idea when you're requesting your guides, mentors, or professors for LORs to share that page, to share that write-up, that these are the things to be mentioned in LORs. Then education scripts or certificates, like any other application, that's very important. Keep them handy. Get them on time from your institutes. They sometimes for the UK universities, you also need to get them get your educational transcripts or certificates to have it mentioned that your course was in English. If it was not, and if they are not in English, you need to get them translated to English. So the eligibility criteria for masters in fine arts, MA or MFA or MBA, is a bachelor degree in your field. If it's not, then a bachelor degree in any field with professional artist experience and a strong portfolio. And if an applicant doesn't even have a bachelor degree, then a very strong portfolio uh, with a long professional artist experience can also sometimes be considered. And most of the institutes, they require IELTS or any English language qualification. So the timeline varies according to institute across the world. For the UK, it's generally December. The application starts from September or October, and the deadlines are usually December or January, or sometimes there are second rounds or third rounds as well, depending on how many number of seats are present. And they open up year prior to the intake year. September intake, there's usually only one intake, and September intake is the major one. If there's another intake as well, then universities have usually mentioned them on their website. So the general tips that one can keep in mind is to be mindful of the application requirements for fine arts. Master in fine arts, the application requirements can vary according to institute that you're applying. Second thing and most important thing is to keep the portfolio as simple and as clear as possible. Have high quality images there, which are clear, which so the production quality of your image does matter, but try to keep it clean so that the whole focus is not on the photography, but rather on the artwork that you have in the image. And for any audio or video work, most of the time we upload them on the drives, or we put the links of our of drives or any cloud storage, but we forgot to keep it as anyone can view link. So try to keep, not try, but that's the necessity to keep the access open for anyone to view when you are applying with your video or audio work. And go through the prompts that are required for your SOP or personal statements, and try to be as direct as possible. Get your SOPs, personal statement, portfolio, and CV, everything reviewed by peers, mentors, or guides, so that sometimes we miss on things and our peers can catch on those things, and this way the gaps can be filled. Especially for your writing part, yeah, the main criteria for the applications are portfolio and artist statement. So do not worry about the eloquence of your writing, because it's Master of Fine Arts are usually practice-based courses. So you are not judged on your writing as such, but mostly on your portfolio. So try to keep the language as clear, as simple as possible. I'll hand it over to Srukrupa now.
Hi, my name is Srukrupa Raghunathan, and I go by the name Krupa, so you can call me Krupa during the workshop. I'm going to be speaking about both masters in film, like creative practice, as well as a PhD in practice-based research, which I did both in the UK. Just to give you a context, I did my master's in filmmaking as my second master's, which had no. So before I did my master's in filmmaking, I had no academic experience of filmmaking or creative practice before I applied for the master's. I worked as a filmmaker. I did make films as part of the collective movements that I was part of, but that was it. So with that, I applied for a master's. So just giving you context that, to do a master's in film or thing, as long as your interest and what you have done is resonating and is kind of connected to the work that you're study that you're planning to do, there's a chance to apply. So yeah, the next slide. So yeah, so for the eligibility of so I'm doing a practice-based film PhD in practice in film studies. It's a practice-based research. As Moonis already said, how there are in film, in creative practice, there is both theory-based and practice-based research. So the difference is of the theory-based to compare to the practice-based is most of your practice leads to your research, in terms of the writing in the PhD process. Yeah, and most of the times the PhD is in film. I might be doing my study PhD in film, but it's mostly interdisciplinary research that kind of draws from different research different subjects like sociology, anthropology, film, psychology, etc., like different humanity, geography, or etc. That kind of, and the outcome is usually the art. So for me, it's the film. And that leads to the thesis. So the film leads to the thesis instead of trying to figure out the artistic gaps and which is different from the theory-based research. It's absolutely new. So in practice-based research in the UK is absolutely a new and also they're trying to figure out how to get more people to do these interdisciplinary researches, and there's more encouragement to do these. So there's So one of the major things is to identify your supervisor. I will be talking about this in detail in the next something. The research proposal for your PhD, a portfolio, CV, LORs, letter of recommendation letters, statement of purpose or personal statement, based on the scholarship which you're applying to. If there are any scholarships, a letter of support from the potential supervisor, IELTS, master degree in relevant subject, or a strong portfolio of relevant work. And then as if the degree is not there, there's a strong portfolio and artistic experience and academic transcripts. The next. And to apply for a master's, you need a statement of purpose, CV, LORs, or personal statement, portfolio, IELTS, bachelor degree in relevant subject. If there is no bachelor degree in relevant subject, a strong portfolio and artistic experience and academic transcripts. So yeah, so how do you identify the institutions? So it's important to identify the institutions where you're planning to study. For masters, it's basically you search for the course that resonates with you and your ambitions, like what you plan to study. For instance, in my context, there were options like, there is in my context, because I came from I had a challenge of like figuring out which masters to do, because I had a huge, like a academic as well as like work experience balance in social and development sector. So I was like, do I do a master's in film and development or media and development, or do I do a practice-based film course? And something which kind of I thought, for me, like I wanted to learn the techniques of filmmaking, which I did not have an academic background, and that's why I chose to do a master's in film. So which might be very different, but also falls into the category of like what you want to do. So that kind of leads to like asking yourself, what is it that you want to learn as part of your master's? Like, what is it that you want to learn from the academic program? So once you identify what you want to learn, identify which courses you want to do, check out the university website for the course overview. Who are the people teaching? What are the course structures? What are the modules that are available? If you could speak to anybody who studied the program, ask them their experience of it if you can, but otherwise it's not like a mandate. For a PhD, search for the university. While you are searching for the university, supervisor and their research matters the most. Like, how it resonates with your research. So it's not about the university, but it's about whether the supervisor is able to guide you through the process, because the relationship between the supervisor and you in this process is the most, your PhD is actually shaped by the supervision of your supervisors in this process. So the 3 years, 4 years, if they do not understand the subject, it means that you need to keep on explaining what you plan to do, and that's not what you want to do. So it's important that the supervisor resonates with your research or research gaps, or in a brief, in not like very, like, very precise, but on a broad level, like, it can be like, so yeah. Secondly, some scholarships require 2 supervisors. Like some universities require 2 supervisors. Some universities require one supervisor's acceptance. Some scholarships require two supervisors from 2 different universities based on the scholarship criteria. Like for instance, AHRC, if you're applying to AHRC in the UK, there are consortiums of few universities together, and those sometimes ideally want 2 supervisors from different universities. Most of the times, it's usually one university, based on the scholarship, based on the requirement. So identify the potential supervisor who's going to be a primary supervisor. So, and ask them if they would recommend the second supervisor too. So next. Research proposal, as I said, is very, very, and also Moonis said, it's a very, very crucial part of a PhD process. Most of the universities in the UK expect you to discuss your research proposal with at least one potential supervisor, at least in the UK. So before you kind of start writing to the university, before you the thing identify, write to a supervisor, potential supervisor, asking if like, what, giving them your background, asking them like, these are some of the questions that you want to inquire as part of your PhD. Ask and mention that how their research resonates with your research, and it'll be nice to have a like, is there a possibility to for them to guide you in this PhD process. So that's the start of the process. So then once they agree upon, you send a research proposal to them. So research proposal is basically like an introduction of like an overview of your research questions, like what are the gaps that you want to address in your research, the background for your research, that's a literature review that, that comprises what is the existing literature that's been done, or what is the work that has been done, what is the kind of methodology that you plan to do in your research, and originality and impact, both academic and beyond academic. So they kind of also look at, because this is something which many of the, they might not mention this, but for scholarships, I think this is important to get like, to actually like think about your project beyond academic and like, beyond academia, and what kind of impact that it could create, a timeline and a list of bibliographies that you have referred for your proposal. So this is usually something between 1,500 to 2,500 words based on the university guidelines. Some, again, this is not like very like brief, but when I was applied to multiple universities, there was a research proposal, like I had to write one research proposal in 500 words too. So please do check the university and the scholarship guidelines for the word limit for the proposal. So you cannot, and tailor make it based on the university. You cannot have a general, like a proposal, but then tailor make it based on the university and the scholarship that you're applying to, based on the word count. So yeah. And the next part is like personal statement or statement of purpose. For masters, this becomes one of the criteria for the application process. The application asks for either personal statement, statement of purpose, or both sometimes. The personal, there is a light difference between between personal statement and SOP. Personal statement is about why you are the right person to study this course, whereas SOP is about why you want to study this course in this university. So it's basically like in personal statement, you're also like speaking about your journey and how your journey has led to wanting to do this academic, like want to study masters, etc. In PhD, a personal statement is your motivation for pursuing your PhD and your relevant experience, both work-wise and academic, to carry out the research. Check out the university criteria again for the word limit for both masters and PhD. There may be like sometimes they might just say four pages, double-sided, with like 1.5 lines. So they might not have a word count, but that is usually about 1,000 words or 500 words. So ideally have it between 500 to 1,000 words is what I would suggest if you are writing a personal statement. For again, like portfolio is very, very important for these girls because that's also why you're doing a master's or in a creative practice, trying to learn something that you have wanting to, like something beyond what you have done. So prepare a link of a website. If you don't want to prepare a link of website, create like YouTube pages with links, like the thing which can be accessible, or Vimeo pages which are accessible, or social media pages like Behance, Instagram, that gives an access to the university selection committee to view your work. Some institutions ask for link, like in the film course that I applied to in many to multiple universities. They ask for links for the films or like the images of your work. One university asked for a show reel, which was about 3 to 4 minutes, or like a 10-minute cut of like a film that you have done, or a 3 to 4 minute introduction of yourself in a creative way. please read the guidelines, university guidelines, or prepare them accordingly. So this is important because this is one of, like, for masters, this is, and also PhD, it's important. If there is nothing mentioned, please do mention the contact person to double check with the department's criteria for portfolio or artistic statement. Sometimes it can just be a statement of your work, giving links to the PDF in the statement. So do check again. Whereas in PhD, it was an easier process because I didn't have to create a website. I just gave links of the films that I have done in the recent past in my CV, to which was accessed by the university selection committee. The next so CV. CV is again very important. CV comprises of your educational background, work experience, awards and honors that you have received, links to your films, photo essays, portfolios that you have presented, publications, if any. Make sure that the CV is very crisp and easy to read. Accessibility is important while reading. It should not be more than 1 to 2 pages, despite you might have had 10 years of experience. Create it in such a way that it kind of comprises, it's crisp, and it's like easy to read. Because each panel, I think, will only sit on your profile for 5 minutes, and how much will they read? So it's also like, the selection panel needs to read things as crisp, as simple, as with clarity, etc. LORs again very, very important for both PhD and masters. It should be from, as others mentioned, it should be from somebody who has seen your work professionally. It could be a guide, mentor, professor in the university, or an employer. Check with the university guidelines for the LORs. Some PhD universities specifically ask for masters from your professors from your previous academic institution. If there is a gap in between your master's and a PhD, or a bachelor's and a master's, it could be from your employer or any guide or mentor who has seen your work. But confirm with the university guidelines. Also check the university guidelines and scholarship guidelines with regards to your LORs when it needs to be submitted, because some scholarships and university guidelines say that your LORs have to be submitted before you submit the application. So check again with the guidelines of the submission process when LORs need to be submitted. If they are, then please let your mentors, whosoever are giving your LORs, the deadlines for the recommendation letter. Next. So for masters, the timeline is basically you ideally apply by January. So while I was applying for my masters in Goldsmiths, I applied in mid-Jan because they needed IELTS, which I had to write in December and get back, and I got the results in April. Whereas in the other universities that I'd applied to, they had rolling applications, so I got to hear about the results within 2 or 3 weeks after my application process. So the application timeline is generally mentioned in the website or in the department website. Check for it. Some universities, as I said, have rolling applications. Some universities also have interviews too. So check for the process. The next slide. For PhD, the timeline is usually like, but for scholarship, when you're applying for scholarships and for the application, it's usually between December to January based on the university to university. So when you are applying, so if this is the deadline that you are, work backwards. Check with your potential supervisor, usually between September to November. The late November would be a bit late because that's also the end of the academic semester. That's also leading to, and people are reading and the deadlines are also approaching. So it might be just too much of pressure for the potential supervisor to respond, to give you feedback, adequate feedback, time for adequate feedback, and to and fro of the conversation to prepare the proposal. When I started the process, I started around October, and I worked with my potential supervisor, who's now my current supervisor, at least 3 to 4 drafts of my research proposal. so that, it could be submitted. So you give that much of like conversational space and time for like developing your research proposal with your supervisor. So it is important to develop that with your supervisor. You will hear back mostly from the university 1 month after your submission, just on the application of the research, whether you've been accepted in the university or not. But it takes for the scholarship results to come, it generally takes about May, April or May. So mostly by end of May, you would get to hear about your scholarship if you have received the scholarship for your PhD or not. Yeah, so that's about it. Any questions? Let's just want to clarify the thing. While writing the proposals, make sure that it is very, very simple language. There is clarity. Identify the gaps in the research, and how are you going to address those gaps? Have that clarity while writing those research, while writing your proposal. Make sure that the language in your proposal, as well as in your portfolio, in your SOPs, etc., are absolutely simple languages. Don't need to use any flowery languages, etc. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Khushboo, Krupa, and Moonis, for being so comprehensive with your presentations. We will now move on to the Q&A part of the presentation. I think we had two questions which have been addressed in the PPTs, but one person is asking, is IELTS necessary? But I guess a continuing question would be, is there a possibility of getting waivers? So maybe if all of you can speak to that.
Yeah, I think IELTS is, if you're applying for a PhD program, IELTS is required and necessary. But it is possible to get an exception by once you've kind of nominated your supervisors, and once the supervisors have also agreed to supervise your project, it is possible to write to them that you are seeking an exception, and they can possibly write to the university asking them for an exception, but it's highly rare that happens. So I don't know, if you want to, you can give it a try, but at some point of time, you will be sitting in an English exam if you're applying for other things as well. So it's like it's not escapable for eternity. So it's better to kind of give it and get rid of it. Yeah.
I just want to add, yeah, English IELTS is most of the times necessary. Some universities in the UK have an exception based on your 12th class marks. So it's not based on your bachelor's marks, based on your 12th class marks, especially if you studied in CBSE or ICSE. So if you have that, there is some universities that make an exception, but most of the times they link the IELTS to your visa application. So they need an IELTS, academic IELTS for applying to the UK. So that's something which you need to keep in mind. Also, if you have had a master's in the UK, while applying for the PhD, there can be an exception made if there's again criteria and like combinations, and that like each university has weird rules and regulations with regards to IELTS. If you have studied within 3 years of your when you graduated from between the application and between your previous graduation, there's a 3-year gap. Like if it is more than 3 years, then you need to rewrite your IELTS. So there's all those criterias. Do check again with the university if they can make an exemption.
Perfect. Another person is asking, is it possible to pursue a second master's degree in the same course? Okay, so I think unanimously, yes.
It's
Yeah.
a yes, but it's also important to add that in your personal statement or statement of purpose, why in the same field and why the second, because you have to justify studying um, in the same field again. That's just it.
Amazing. I think those are the questions in chat. If anybody wants to just raise their hand and ask a question, it's also not many people, so feel free to just sort of make it interactive. If anyone has any question, don't feel like it's too basic or it might be dumb to ask that. Yes, go for it, Anis. One.
Hello. Hi everyone. Hi Moonis. So my question is like how many works should we ideally like put in the portfolio? Like my work has been majorly like comics and animation from past 4 years. And I have done installations and performances as well. So like what should be the portfolio like for me? Thanks.
First of all, it also depends on the degree that you're applying for. That's something that really matters. So if you're applying for a filmmaking or an animation degree, then you potentially need to focus on your animations and probably upload them in YouTube and put links there as well. You could put screenshots, screen grabs from the film as well. Yeah, so first of all that, and then second of all, if you're applying for a general visual arts degree, then you could put a combination of both, but there's no limitation on how many works you can put in a folio. So for example, if you have, let's say, a limitation of 10 images, then it can be 10 works itself, if that works, if that helps explain your practice in entirety. So वैसा कोई ये नहीं है limitation नहीं है.
Also, you can create a website for yourself, like if putting like which has like links to all your works. Like it's not like published, but just say I've published, I've done this work, I've done this work, just a snippet of an image of that work, etc. With like another page of like where have you performed, where have these been screened, where have they been done. So that gives a kind of like a comprehensive view of your variety of work that you have done so far.
Thank you.
You have a follow-up question to that, Anis? Okay.
No, thanks.
Great. Does anyone else have any question to ask? Because it is so it's been 1 hour, so if no one has any questions, then we can close the session. Great. So I guess yeah, no questions, which is fine because the presentations were extremely comprehensive. So I think sort of most of the things have been answered or have been spoken to. Once again, Khushboo.
Sorry, Ms. Bha, one last comment. Those of you who are planning to apply for a PhD, I think you should think thrice before applying because it is going to suck life out of you. Usually academia does that. So be prepared for that in advance. And it's a very long, hard experience, depending, of course, on your work ethic and all that stuff. So, and also academic writing is one of the worst things that exists in this world. So if you're prepared for that, feel free to apply. Oh, there's a question from Hissana.
Yeah, hi. Actually, I would like to know, like, if we are a beginner and we don't have much of anything to show, but only the beginner level contents that we have created, but interest in a diverse area, I can talk about myself. I'm not fixed into one box, but I have tried different mediums, and literally I don't know where to fix myself and where to. I mean, in which masters I should pursue in which area and all. So in that sense, from where should one begin, right? Because you have interest in all, filmmaking. There is a bit of interest in filmmaking, a bit for visual arts or fine arts. So it's like floating over. If somebody could just help, it would be fun.
This totally resonates with me. In my bachelor's, even till now, I work with different mediums, and if it's the theme or the context of my practice is cohesive, but the mediums that I use, the materials that I use are very varied. So for that, in the UK, you have a lot of universities do not have a specific stream. Like you go in painting, or you go in film, or you go in performance art. So they have a one big umbrella term for that. It's master in fine arts, or just master in visual arts, master in contemporary art. There are different terms which do not have specific streams. So I think for me, I am doing the same right now with my masters. I chose a program which does not limit me to one medium or one stream of fine arts. And in that way, I'm able to work on different mediums and experiment and choose what I want to do further. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
There was one question on scholarships available in the UK and masters, but I've responded to it on chat, but just in case
Yeah.
we send the recording.
So
Yeah, do you
I
want
can just like this speak at least like for masters and like PhD. Like for masters, there is Shevling, there is Inlax, there is Charles Wallace, there is there's, and sometimes some of the like universities also give scholarships. So check those things. For PhD, there is university funding, there is ESRC, there's AHRC, mostly humanities like arts-based programs. AHRC is what most of the people do. AHRC is a consortium of like few universities together. They give about 30 to 40 for 40 PhD scholarships, which kind of depending on which university where you are, they kind of cover the home tuition fees as well as like living expenses. They might not cover the gap between the home and the international tuition fees. Some universities do cover that. So again, check with the university and the websites in the university. What are the scholarships that are there? Right. Um, One of the other ways is also each course that you have, there is a course lead who becomes your point of contact for like application process. Write to them asking what are the scholarships that are available that particular year for PhD students, especially if you're applying from India. So do write. So I did write to everybody, like, asking which university, which scholarship, which deadlines, because I applied to be honest, I applied to about 4 universities which had like 7 scholarships deadlines. So there I had to like follow 4 different scholarship deadlines, four PhD application deadlines, 7 scholarship deadlines. Each criteria was different. So for each of them, so the LORs were different for the scholarships, LORs were different for the PhD applications. So do write to the concerned person in that saying that, for additional details, contact so and so, write to them. They're always there to help you out with information. So do not hesitate to write to people to get more information. If you want to like ask regarding scholarships or PhD, like for masters and PhD in the UK. So they will guide you with the links, they will guide you with the possibilities.
Anis, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I want to ask, like, I have identified, like, shortlisted a couple of universities here in the UK and US, but I wanted to know, like, if anyone can help me figure out, like, universities in Germany, because, like, I have been like researching, but like I couldn't find any course which will suit my work. So like, if anyone could like help me list out the universities or courses in Germany, that would be great. Thank you.
I think, yeah, Germany, you can apply. Oh gosh, I just remembered the university, but University of Weimar, hey, it has a good. I don't know if it is a good program or not, but lots of my friends were there, so you can apply there. They have a program there which is very flexible in terms of what you can do there. It's mostly, I think, self-directed research based program, and but you should look at other possibilities as well. I could potentially put you in touch with a couple of my colleagues and friends who have done their masters here. But Germany is a good place to do visual arts as well, amongst other places, but you know how the country is otherwise. So yeah, you can.
Thank you. I'll probably text you. I think. Thanks.
There's another question, which is how hard is it to get tenure track in creative arts academia? Moonis, you're on mute. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yes, I don't know, but really don't have an idea how to answer that question. If anyone else can kind of talk me.
I can just say it's becoming difficult with basically universities cutting funding, job strikes, university strike. At least in the UK, the number of posts are becoming very smaller. So it's a little more difficult. Most of the people who are like doing a PhD are asked to look for opportunities outside the PhD. To like think academic is not the only solution. So
Yeah, I think also, I mean, creative arts industry is deeply hierarchical. So when you are if you want to pursue more of creative arts, you have to kind of accept that kind of reality, that it's a deeply hierarchical, deeply biased industry, and if your work is critical about certain issues, then probably it becomes harder and harder for you. and 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 academia has its own politics. So in creative arts especially, at least that's what I have found, is that it's very hard to get into academic positions. If you are casual, तो फिर तो कोई problem नहीं है आपको, बस casual. I mean, I have had colleagues who are casual for 9 years, 10 years, 11 years, and they are doing lecture and kind of professor, even lecturer. I mean, teaching their own courses, in a sense that they have developed their own courses from scratch, created material for it and all of that stuff, but they are still casuals and they're paid on casual rates, and they're supposed to do assistance, but they are actually doing lecturer jobs. And how and when that is going to change, I don't know. If that is going to change also, I don't know. So that's creative arts for you. But there are other possibilities also, applying for grants and working by yourself. And if you have a wide set of skills, then you could also kind of extend and do freelance or work in industry, which I'm not saying is not biased, but which can be slightly better than academia. Academia is like hell.
just also like to add to that, like when you're doing a PhD, one of the things that they do, one of the things that they've been encouraging at the university that I'm studying is to ask, like as TAs, you get an opportunity to be a teaching assistant, and they ask you to teach wider courses, not like limit to the course that you have been doing a PhD in. So that kind of like opens up your options to teach like courses which are not just what you have done your PhD in. So there is that's also been encouraged, but again, it's very competitive, and yeah.
Amazing.
I sorry,
Yeah.
I want to add one thing about the scholarships. for master's program, especially for the UK. They are rare. Do not keep your hopes on scholarships. It's a very heartbreaking process going through the scholarships or applying to them because there are hardly any places. US has better scholarships. Universities are well funded, and Canada as well has well funded universities. And I know a lot of my friends and acquaintances have also got full scholarships from the universities itself. With UK, international students are cash cows. They are supposed to pay the fees, so the scholarships are very limited. Even if they are, they do not suffice much for the tuition fees or living expenses.
Also, sorry, just to add more onto that, Khushboo, thank you. Germany is slightly better, and also the Scandinavian countries, because usually some of the universities here are publicly funded, so there's no tuition fee per se. तो आपको tuition fee नहीं देना है वगैरह. So यहाँ पे you have to kind of the living costs and rent and all of that stuff is something that you have to cover, but you can apply for scholarships here and there, funding here and there after you come here. So it is better in terms of scholarships and funding here in Germany, and as also in Scandinavian countries. In Australia, though, they say that you are eligible for research training program scholarships or Melbourne research scholarships for your if you do a master's by research degree, but that's not true at all. They rarely fund masters by research scholarships.
Great, then. I think that's about it. I don't see any questions in chat and no raised hands. So I think we are now at the end of this workshop. And as I was saying, thank you to Khushboo, Moonis, and Krupa for joining us today and hosting this workshop and being so patient with all the questions and being so comprehensive with your presentation. Thank you everyone who joined us today for the workshop. You'll find a recording of this workshop on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, you can email us at info@project.eduaccess.com. I'm going to leave the email ID in chat. So if there's any questions that you want us to send to the speakers, if you have any questions about the presentation, about graduate applications to creative arts, feel free to email us and we will try to get your questions answered by our three panelists here. And yeah, that's about it. If you're a mentee with us and if you have any questions related to the mentorship program, please reach out to the operations team and they will sort of respond to your queries and sort of map you with the required and requested mentor. I think, thank you so much once again to three of you, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you have a nice rest of the weekend. Take care. Thanks everyone. Bye.